They gave us democracy, but also sentenced Socrates to death for asking too many questions. They built temples that still wow tourists today, but banned women from entering them. And sure, we quote their philosophers like gospel, but honestly, would you survive a dinner party with Plato? Welcome to ancient Greece, the birthplace of the modern world, just not quite the version you were taught in school. Because if you think this was a golden age of wisdom and olive oil, get ready. Behind the marble columns and poetic quotes lies a world where logic and superstition shared the same bed, where citizens ruled, but only if you were male, rich, and free, and where excellence meant training naked and debating metaphysics before lunch. Before we dive in, tap that like button if you've ever had the nerve to question something out loud. You'd probably do well in the agora. Subscribe for more history that makes you rethink the timeline. And comment below. Which Greek invention do you actually use more, democracy or feta? Because beneath all the statues and syllogisms, ancient Greece wasn't just a chapter in your textbook. It was a messy, brilliant, broken experiment, and you're still living in its ripple effects. So light your metaphorical oil lamp, open your curious mind, and let's take a walk through the real Greece, the one that changed everything, by daring to argue with itself. You open your eyes as golden sunlight filters through the small window of your modest stone house. The warmth touches your face, a gentle invitation to rise and greet the day in Athens, 450 BCE, the height of what future generations will call the Golden Age. The air carries a symphony of scents: olive oil from last night's lamp, fresh bread baking somewhere down the narrow street, and the ever-present hint of salt from the nearby harbor of Piraeus. You stretch and sit up on your cline, a wooden couch that serves as both daytime seating and nighttime bed. The woven reed mat beneath you rustles as you move. It's not the memory foam mattress you're used to, but after several nights here, your body has adapted to its firm support. Your woolen blanket slides away, and the morning air kisses your skin. It's already warm, promising another sun-drenched day in this ancient city that pulses with life, philosophy, and contradictions at every corner. Through your window, you catch a glimpse of the Acropolis in the distance, that magnificent hill crowned with marble temples that gleam like a beacon. The Parthenon stands proud, still in its prime, not the weathered ruin of postcards, but a vibrant, painted structure at the heart of Athenian identity. You hear the voices of your neighbors already active in the streets below, children laughing, merchants calling out their wares, the occasional bleat of a goat being led to market. The day has begun without waiting for you. Rising from your bed, your bare feet meet the cool, smooth surface of the packed earth floor. No plush carpet here, just the natural ground polished by years of footsteps. It feels surprisingly pleasant against your soles. Cool now, but you know it will hold the day's heat by evening. A terracotta water jug sits in the corner, and you pour some into a simple bowl for your morning wash. The water is refreshingly cool against your face, a brief respite from the warming air. This simple act connects you to countless Athenians performing the same ritual across the city. You dress in the fashion of the time. For men, a chiton, a simple rectangular cloth folded around the body and pinned at the shoulders. For women, a longer peplos, draped and secured in a similar fashion. The fabric is lighter than you expected, woven wool that breathes surprisingly well in the Mediterranean climate. The clothing lacks pockets, zippers, or buttons, inventions far in the future. Instead, a rope belt cinches your garment at the waist, creating folds that can hold small items. Everything about daily life here requires adaptations you hadn't considered in the modern world. Your stomach gently reminds you it's time for breakfast. The morning meal in Athens is simple: some barley bread dipped in wine. Yes, wine for breakfast, though it's watered down significantly. The Athenians considered drinking undiluted wine a mark of barbarism, something only non-Greeks would do. The bread is heartier than you're used to, coarse and filling. It lacks the light, airy texture of modern bread, but there's something satisfying about its substantial nature. This will fuel you through the morning activities until the midday meal. You step outside your dwelling, and the full sensory experience of ancient Athens engulfs you. The narrow street bustles with activity, neighbors greeting each other, artisans opening workshops, slaves carrying water from public fountains. Chickens scratch in the dust near your feet, and a neighbor's dog eyes you curiously before continuing its morning patrol. Animals are everywhere in the city, From the household pets to the occasional donkey laden with goods, their hooves clicking rhythmically on stone pathways. The streets themselves would shock modern urban planners, narrow, winding, and with no apparent organization. They follow the natural contours of the land, creating a maze-like quality that somehow makes sense to those who live here. No grid system, no street signs, just landmarks and familiarity. You navigate by the position of the sun and the slope of the land, heading downhill toward the heart of the city. Unlike modern sidewalks, there's no clear division between pedestrian and vehicle space. Everyone shares the same path, stepping aside for loaded carts or wealthy citizens on horseback. The smell of the city intensifies as you walk, a complex bouquet of humanity, animals, cooking, and commerce. Without modern sanitation, the less pleasant odors mingle freely with the more appealing ones. It's not overwhelming, just different, and surprisingly, you find yourself adjusting to it quickly. Children dart past you, playing a game with knuckle bones, small animal joints that serve as a combination of dice and jacks. Their laughter sounds exactly like children's laughter in your time. Some aspects of humanity truly are timeless. You pass a small shrine built into the wall where someone has left flowers and a small portion of food as an offering to Hermes, protector of travelers and merchants. These little religious touchpoints are everywhere in the city, reminders that the gods are believed to be ever present in daily life. As you approach the city center, the streets widen slightly and the buildings grow more impressive. Stone replaces mud brick, and you begin to see touches of the famous Greek architectural style, columns supporting overhanging roofs, geometric patterns decorating doorways. The morning sun now sits higher in the cloudless blue sky, its heat intensifying. You understand why Athenians rise early and rest during midday. The Mediterranean sun commands respect, especially in these days before sunscreen and air conditioning. You reach a public fountain where women gather with clay amphorae to collect water. Unlike your world of indoor plumbing, water here must be fetched daily. The women chat as they wait their turn, exchanging news and observations, an ancient form of social networking. Some of these women are clearly slaves, distinguished by their shorter hair and simpler clothing. Others are citizen wives and daughters. The strict social hierarchy is visible in every interaction, yet there's a familiar humanity in their conversations that transcends these divisions. The fountain itself is a marvel of ancient engineering. Water flows continuously from a stone lion's mouth, fed by an aqueduct system that brings fresh water from miles away. For all their technological limitations, the Athenians have mastered the essentials of comfortable urban living. You continue toward the Agora, the beating heart of Athenian civic life. As you walk, you pass a barber shop where men gather not just for grooming, but for gossip and debate. The snippets of conversation you overhear range from local politics to philosophical questions about the nature of virtue. The Athenian obsession with discussion and debate surrounds you. Every conversation seems to have an underlying structure of proposal, counter-argument, and synthesis. These people aren't just talking, they're constantly engaged in the exercise of rhetoric, the art of persuasion. As you near the Agora, the crowd thickens and the cacophony of voices grows louder. Unlike the enclosed shopping malls of your time, this marketplace is open to the sky, a sprawling public space surrounded by colonnaded buildings and filled with temporary stalls selling every imaginable good. The Agora serves multiple purposes: market, meeting place, religious center, and administrative hub. Here, commerce and civics blend seamlessly in a way that would seem strange in your compartmentalized modern world. Food vendors call out their offerings: fresh fish from the morning's catch, olives, cheeses, vegetables from nearby farms, and bread still warm from clay ovens. The absence of refrigeration means everything sold here was either harvested this morning or preserved through drying, salting, or fermentation. You notice there are no tomatoes, potatoes, or corn among the vegetables. These New World crops won't reach Greek soil for another 2,000 years. Instead, there are fava beans, lentils, chickpeas, and an abundance of greens that form the foundation of the Mediterranean diet. The fish seller proudly displays his catch: glistening sea bream, red mullet, and sardines arranged on beds of herbs to mask the growing smell as the day warms. Athenians love their seafood, a natural preference for people living so close to the bountiful Aegean Sea. Nearby, a honey seller offers samples from small terracotta pots. You taste a golden drop and are surprised by its intense floral quality. The bees have feasted on wild thyme that grows on the mountains surrounding Athens, creating a flavor more complex than any honey you've known. A wine merchant presides over rows of amphorae, each containing wine from different regions. Some are resinous, flavored with pine sap that acts as a preservative and gives Greek retsina its distinctive taste. Others are sweetened with honey or infused with herbs. None taste quite like the wines of your time. As you browse the market stalls, you observe the economic system in action. There's no paper money here. Transactions happen with small silver coins bearing the owl of Athens. For larger purchases, people might weigh out specific amounts of silver or even barter goods directly. The concept of shopping as entertainment doesn't exist here. People buy what they need when they need it. Without refrigeration or effective storage methods, daily shopping is a necessity rather than a choice, creating this bustling market culture. You pass a potter's stall displaying vessels of all sizes, from tiny perfume bottles to massive storage amphorae. The black and red figured pottery is at the height of its artistic development now, each piece telling stories from mythology or daily life in detailed, stylized imagery. In another corner of the agora, you find clothing merchants selling lengths of woven cloth, sandal makers crafting leather footwear to order, and jewelers creating delicate pieces from gold, silver, and polished stones. The craftsmanship is exquisite, all done by hand with tools that would seem primitive to modern artisans. The absence of plastics is notable. Everything around you is made from natural materials: wood, stone, clay, metal, leather, and fabric. Nothing is disposable. Objects are made to last, to be repaired rather than replaced, used until they truly fall apart. Above the market noise, you hear a public announcement being made. A herald with a powerful voice calls out news from the city officials, information about an upcoming festival, ship arrivals, and a reminder about tomorrow's assembly meeting for all citizens. This is media in its most direct form. No newspapers, radio, or social networks. Just information passed vocally from officials to the people, then spread through conversations and personal networks. News travels surprisingly fast through this organic system, though accuracy sometimes suffers in the retelling. As the morning advances, you notice groups of men gathering in the shade of the stoa, the long colonnaded porches that line one side of the agora. These aren't just casual meetings, but informal philosophical schools where ideas are exchanged through conversation rather than structured lessons. You overhear a heated debate about the nature of justice between followers of different philosophical traditions. One group argues that justice is whatever benefits the strongest in society. Another counters that justice must be based on universal principles that benefit all. The argument sounds remarkably familiar to modern ethical debates. What strikes you is how ordinary citizens engage with these complex ideas. Philosophy isn't confined to academic institutions here. It lives in the marketplace, accessible to anyone with the leisure time to participate. Of course, that primarily means free men, a small percentage of the total population. As you continue exploring, you come upon the Bouleuterion, where the Council of 500 meets to prepare business for the assembly. Outside, you see citizens checking a large board where new proposed laws are posted publicly for all to read and consider before voting. Transparency in government, Athenian style. Near midday, the agora begins to empty as the intensifying heat drives people to seek shelter. This is the time for the main meal of the day, followed by a rest period, the original siesta, a practical adaptation to the Mediterranean climate long before air conditioning. You find a small cookshop where simple meals are served to those who don't return home for dining. The menu is limited but satisfying: a bowl of lentil soup flavored with herbs, bread for dipping, and a small portion of olives on the side. No utensils are provided. You eat with your hands and pieces of bread as scoops. The seating arrangement consists of simple benches along trestle tables. Your fellow diners include artisans, minor merchants, and a few slaves running errands for their households. The conversation flows easily, with strangers discussing politics as comfortably as neighbors might chat about the weather. You notice the absence of certain foods you take for granted. No sugar. Honey is the primary sweetener. No coffee or tea, no citrus fruits, and certainly no processed foods. The diet is simple but nutritionally sound: grains, legumes, vegetables, fruits, fish, and small amounts of meat for those who can afford it. After your meal, you follow local custom and find a shady spot to rest during the hottest part of the day. Businesses close, streets empty, and a relative quiet descends on the normally bustling city. This rhythm of activity following the natural cycles of light and temperature feels profoundly sensible. As the worst of the heat passes, the city gradually reawakens. You decide to visit one of Athens' most distinctive institutions, the gymnasium. Unlike modern gyms focused solely on fitness, these are centers for both physical and intellectual development, true to the Greek ideal of a sound mind and a sound body. The gymnasium consists of open training areas surrounded by colonnaded walkways. Young men exercise completely naked. The word gymnasium comes from gymnos, meaning naked. This practice, shocking to modern sensibilities, seems perfectly natural to Athenians, who celebrate the athletic male form as an expression of civic virtue. The activities range from running and wrestling to discus and javelin throwing. Physical trainers move among the athletes, offering corrections and encouragement. The emphasis isn't just on strength, but on grace, proportion, and discipline, qualities valued in both athletics and citizenship. In the shade of the porticos, older men engage the youth in conversation, creating an informal educational setting. This is how much learning happens in Athens, through dialogue and mentorship rather than structured classrooms. You recognize this as the ancestor of Socratic teaching methods still used in law schools and seminars. Women are noticeably absent from the gymnasium. This institution, like many in Athens, is exclusively male. Female citizens lead much more sheltered lives, centered around the household rather than public spaces. Their athleticism, if developed at all, would be practiced privately, away from male eyes. You observe a group practicing for an upcoming dramatic competition, rehearsing lines from a new tragedy that examines the conflict between divine law and human authority. Theater here isn't merely entertainment, but a form of civic education and religious observance subsidized by the state and wealthy patrons. After spending some time at the gymnasium, you make your way toward the Acropolis, the sacred hill that dominates the city physically and spiritually. The path upward grows steeper, and you join a stream of people making the climb, some as tourists like yourself, others bringing offerings to the temples above. The ascent gives you a growing perspective of the city spreading below, a dense collection of modest homes and shops with narrow, winding streets, surrounded by the massive defensive walls that protect Athens from invasion. Beyond lie olive groves, farms, and the distant glimmer of the sea. As you climb higher, the noise of the city fades, replaced by the sound of sandals on stone and the gentle rustle of wind through cypress trees. The air feels clearer here, infused with the scent of wild herbs growing between the rocks, oregano, thyme, and rosemary, releasing their oils in the afternoon warmth. You pass through the Propylaea, the monumental gateway to the Acropolis, its massive marble columns creating a transitional space between the secular world below and the sacred precinct above. The stone beneath your feet has been worn smooth by countless pilgrims over decades, and then you stand before the Parthenon, and no photograph or video could have prepared you for its impact. The harmony of its proportions, the subtle curves engineered into seemingly straight lines, the way it both commands the landscape and seems to grow naturally from it, all create a sense of perfection that resonates beyond rational understanding. Unlike the white marble ruins of modern tourism, the temple before you is vibrantly painted in reds, blues, and golds. Massive sculptures adorning the pediments depict stories of the gods in dynamic, frozen action. The effect is not austere but alive, a celebration in stone of divine and human achievement. Inside, the temple houses the massive cult statue of Athena Parthenos, 40 feet tall, made of gold and ivory over a wooden core, her helmet touching the ceiling of the inner chamber. The goddess stands majestic, shield at her side, a smaller statue of Nike, Victory, held in her outstretched hand. Worshippers approach with offerings, small cakes, flowers, tokens of personal significance, placing them reverently before the goddess. Prayer here is both communal and individual, a direct connection to divine forces believed to influence every aspect of daily life. You observe the rituals with respect, noting how religion in Athens isn't a separate domain of life but interwoven with civic identity, family obligations, and personal ethics. The boundaries between sacred and secular that seem so clear in your time are beautifully blurred here. Other temples and shrines dot the Acropolis plateau, each dedicated to different deities or aspects of Athena. Priests and priestesses move among them, tending sacred fires, accepting offerings, and performing rituals that maintain the harmony between the human and divine worlds. As the afternoon progresses, you make your way back down to the city, where the pace of life has picked up again after the midday rest. The workshops have reopened, and artisans have returned to their crafts. Potters shaping clay on wheels powered by foot, metalworkers hammering bronze into useful tools and beautiful objects. You pause to watch a sandal maker at work, amazed at how he creates perfectly fitted footwear with just a few simple tools, a knife, an awl, and a curved needle for stitching the leather. Each pair is made specifically for the customer's foot, a level of customization rarely seen in your mass-produced world. Nearby, a woman works at a loom set up in the doorway of her home, taking advantage of the natural light. The rhythmic clacking of the heddles forms a backdrop to her conversation with a neighbor. This domestic production of textiles is primarily women's work, essential to the household economy. You notice how most manufacturing happens in plain sight, the processes of creation transparent rather than hidden away in distant factories. There's an honesty to this system where producer and consumer interact directly, often developing relationships that span generations. The afternoon begins its gentle slide toward evening, and you find yourself drawn to a small tavern where people gather after work. The establishment is simple: a courtyard with wooden tables, a few olive trees providing shade, and a counter where the proprietor serves wine from large clay amphorae. You join a table where you're welcomed without question. The Greek concept of xenia, or hospitality to strangers, is deeply ingrained. The wine comes in a simple terracotta cup, mixed with water in a ratio of about 3 parts water to 1 part wine. Drinking undiluted wine is considered uncivilized. Your companions are craftsmen unwinding after their day's labor. Their hands bear the marks of their trades: calluses, ingrained colors from dyes, the subtle deformations that come from years of repeating the same skilled movements. These physical signatures of work are largely absent in your automated age. Conversation flows as freely as the wine, touching on politics, always, recent sporting competitions, the upcoming festival honoring Dionysus, and good-natured disagreements about whether the new play by Sophocles truly honors the old traditions or veers too far into modern sensibilities. You're struck by how informed these ordinary citizens are about matters of state. They discuss pending legislation with the casual authority of people who expect to vote on it directly, not through representatives. This is democracy in its original form: direct, participatory, and limited to those with citizenship. As dusk approaches, oil lamps are lit around the tavern, casting a warm, flickering light that softens faces and creates pools of shadow. The atmosphere grows more intimate as the day's business gives way to relaxation and camaraderie. Musicians arrive with simple instruments: a kithara, similar to a lyre, hand drums, and reed pipes. The music they play has scales and rhythms that sound slightly foreign to your ear, the ancestor of Western music but with different intervals and harmonic relationships. Someone begins to recite poetry, not reading from a text but performing from memory, a skill highly valued in this society where literacy, while more common than in many ancient cultures, is far from universal. The audience listens with appreciation, occasionally joining in on familiar refrains. As night fully claims the city, you make your way back to your lodging through streets now lit only by occasional oil lamps in doorways and the silver light of a waxing moon. Public lighting doesn't exist. People navigate by familiarity or carry their own lamps if they must travel after dark. The city takes on a different character at night, quieter but not silent, with the sounds of conversations from open windows, distant music, and the occasional bark of dogs. Most activities cease with darkness, both from practical necessity and from the expense of artificial lighting. You reach your dwelling and light your own lamp, a simple clay vessel with olive oil feeding a wick of twisted plant fibers. The flame wavers with slight air currents, casting animated shadows on the walls that seem to tell their own stories of ancient mysteries. Before retiring, you perform a small ritual at the household shrine, a gesture of respect to the protective spirits of the home that feels natural in this world, where the divine touches everything. It's not your tradition, But there's something comforting in these small acknowledgments of forces beyond the visible. Your bed awaits, the same Klein that serves as daytime seating now prepared for night with a rolled wool blanket. The day's physical activities, all that walking on stone streets, the climb to the Acropolis, have left your body pleasantly tired in a way that modern conveniences often prevent. You lie down, adjusting to the firm surface, and pull the blanket against the cooling night air. Above, through your small window, you see a patch of star-filled sky, brighter and more vivid than in your light-polluted modern world. These are the same stars the ancients used to navigate ships and mark the seasons. As sleep approaches, you reflect on the strange contradiction of feeling both alien and at home in this distant world. For all its differences in technology, comfort, and social structures, the human experiences of connection, wonder, and belonging remain remarkably familiar across the millennia. Morning arrives with the first pale light of dawn and the sounds of a city already stirring. You rise with the household, adapting to the natural rhythms that govern life before electric lighting extended the day artificially. Sleep patterns here follow the sun's journey rather than entertainment schedules. The morning routine repeats: water for washing, simple bread and watered wine for breakfast, clothing adjusted for another warm day. But today, you decide to experience a different aspect of Athenian life by visiting one of the city's most distinctive institutions, the public baths. The bathing complex is a social center as much as a hygienic facility. Upon entering, you pay a small fee to the attendant, 2 small bronze coins that feel warm in your palm as you hand them over. Inside, the space opens into a series of rooms, serving different functions in the bathing ritual. First comes the apoditirion, or changing room, where you undress and leave your clothing under the watchful eye of a slave who prevents theft. Nudity is unremarkable here. Bodies of all ages and conditions move through the space with an unself-consciousness that feels both liberating and slightly disorienting to your modern sensibilities. The frigidarium contains a cold plunge pool where some bathers begin their experience with an invigorating dip. You watch as they emerge, gasping and laughing, their skin pebbled with goosebumps despite the warm air, a universal human reaction that bridges the centuries. Next is the tepidarium, a warm room where you can relax, allowing your muscles to loosen before proceeding to the caldarium, the hottest chamber. The heating system beneath the floors, an early version of radiant heating, keeps the stone pleasantly warm beneath your bare feet. In the caldarium, steam rises from water poured over heated stones. The heat opens your pores and induces a cleansing sweat. Without soap as you know it, cleaning the body involves sweating, then scraping the skin with a curved metal tool called a strigil to remove dirt, oil, and dead skin. Slaves or bath attendants assist those who can afford their services, applying olive oil to the skin before scraping it clean. The oil, infused with herbs or flower essences, leaves behind a subtle fragrance. You opt to perform this ritual yourself, awkwardly at first but soon finding the rhythm of it. The bathing process concludes with another cold rinse or plunge, closing the pores and leaving your skin feeling remarkably clean and invigorated despite the unfamiliar methods. The contrast between hot and cold, tension and release, creates a sense of physical well-being that needs no translation across time. Throughout the bathing complex, conversation flows as freely as the water. Politics, philosophy, and personal gossip mingle in an atmosphere where social barriers, if not entirely dissolved, become more permeable. Here, ideas circulate along with people moving through the bathing ritual. You notice how the baths serve multiple functions in this society. Hygiene, certainly, but also physical therapy, social networking, and informal education. In a world without mass media, these gathering places facilitate the exchange of news and ideas essential to a functioning democracy. After your bath, feeling refreshed, you decide to witness another essential Athenian institution, the courts. The judicial system forms a cornerstone of democratic governance, and trials are public spectacles that draw crowds of interested citizens. The court meets in the open air, with simple wooden benches arranged for the jurors, 501 of them for important cases, a number deliberately chosen to prevent ties and reduce the effectiveness of bribery. The large jury size strikes you as unwieldy by modern standards, yet it reflects the Athenian commitment to broad participation. 2 speakers address the jury in turn, each allocated equal time measured by a water clock, a vessel with a small hole that empties during their speech. No lawyers represent them. Citizens are expected to speak for themselves, though some hire speechwriters to prepare their arguments. The case involves a dispute between merchants over a shipment of grain allegedly damaged during transport. The technical details matter less than the rhetorical strategies employed. Appeals to fairness, character witnesses, emotional pleas, and clever wordplay that occasionally draws appreciative murmurs from the audience. You're struck by how the judicial process blends entertainment with civic duty. Jurors receive a small payment for their service. 3 obols, enough for a day's food, making jury duty accessible even to poorer citizens. The payment acknowledges that democracy requires participation, which requires time away from other work. After both sides present their cases, the jurors vote immediately, without deliberation, by placing bronze discs into urns, one for guilty, one for innocent. The instant decision seems hasty compared to your experience of sequestered juries carefully weighing evidence, but it reflects a different understanding of justice. The merchant accused of negligence is found liable and must pay compensation to the plaintiff. The verdict is accepted without appeal. The case is closed. Justice here is swift, public, and final, qualities both admirable and sometimes problematic when human judgment is inevitably imperfect. As midday approaches again, you join the flow of people heading home for the main meal and afternoon rest. The rhythm of the day repeats itself, a comforting pattern that connects individuals to the larger community through shared timing of daily activities. This time you're invited to dine with a citizen family in their home, offering a glimpse into domestic life rarely seen by visitors. The house, like most in Athens, presents a blank face to the street, plain walls with few or no windows, all activity focused inward around a central courtyard. You enter through a single door into a small vestibule, then into the courtyard where air circulates freely, and a small garden provides herbs for cooking. Rooms open onto this space, their functions fluid rather than rigidly defined. What serves as dining room today might be workspace or sleeping area tomorrow. The family consists of the citizen father, his wife, 3 children, and 2 household slaves who move easily among the family members, their status marked by behavior and dress rather than physical separation. The relationships are hierarchical yet intimate in a way that defies simple modern categories. The meal is served on low tables with the diners reclining on couches, a position that feels awkward until you adjust to it. Women traditionally sit rather than recline, another marker of gender distinctions that permeate every aspect of life. The food is simple but abundant. Barley flatbreads, a stew of lentils with leeks and herbs, fresh cheese, olives, and figs for sweetness. Wine flows freely, always mixed with water in the civilized Greek fashion. The flavors are clean and direct, untainted by preservatives or artificial ingredients. Conversation during the meal touches on family matters, neighborhood news, and the children's education. The eldest son, about 12, proudly recites a passage from Homer he has memorized in school. The education system emphasizes memorization of cultural touchstones as foundation for citizenship. You notice the different roles within the household. The husband engages with public affairs. The wife manages domestic resources, including directing the slaves. The children absorb cultural values through observation and instruction. Every member has clearly defined responsibilities within the family unit. After the meal, as the household settles into afternoon quiet, you thank your hosts and venture out again, this time to explore the residential areas away from the civic center. The contrast between public and private spaces in Athens is striking. Splendor in temples and civic buildings, modesty in personal dwellings. The streets in residential districts are even narrower, sometimes barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. Houses share walls, creating dense blocks interrupted occasionally by small shrines or wells where neighbors gather. The concept of privacy differs here. Physical space is limited, but social boundaries are clearly understood. You pass a small school operated in the shade of an olive tree. A dozen boys seated on simple benches while their teacher leads them through writing exercises on wax tablets. Education is private, not state-run, available primarily to boys from families who can afford the fees. The curriculum focuses on what Greeks call mousike, not just music but all arts inspired by the muses, including poetry, dance, and literature, along with physical training and basic literacy and numeracy. The goal is creating well-rounded citizens rather than specialists, generalists capable of participating in all aspects of civic life. As you continue walking, You encounter a funeral procession making its way toward the cemetery outside the city walls. Death, like birth and marriage, is marked by community rituals that give structure to life's transitions and reinforce social bonds through shared observance. Female mourners lead the procession, their traditional lamentations giving voice to grief in a culturally prescribed way. The body, washed and dressed by family members, is carried on a bier toward its final resting place. Graves are marked with stele, carved stone markers that often depict the deceased in idealized form. You follow at a respectful distance, noting how death remains integrated into community life rather than isolated in hospitals and funeral homes. This transparency around mortality seems both more difficult and more honest than modern practices that often shield people from life's inevitable conclusion. The cemetery itself lies along the road leading from the city gates, a location both practical, preserving valuable urban space for the living, and symbolic, the dead accompanying travelers on their journeys. The grave markers range from simple to elaborate depending on the family's wealth and status. Returning to the city, you pass a small sanctuary dedicated to Asclepius, god of healing, where people seeking relief from illness sleep in hopes of receiving divine guidance through dreams. This blending of religious practice with medical treatment reveals how the Greeks understood health as involving both physical and spiritual elements. Inside the sanctuary, you see anatomical votives, small clay replicas of body parts, left as offerings by those who have been cured or who seek healing for specific ailments. These tangible expressions of hope and gratitude create a visual record of human vulnerability and resilience across time. A physician tends to patients in an adjacent building, applying treatments based on observation and theory rather than the supernatural. Though the line between medicine and religion remains permeable, the Hippocratic approach, revolutionary for its time, seeks natural rather than divine causes for disease. As afternoon transitions toward evening, you make your way to the Theater of Dionysus on the south slope of the Acropolis. A performance of a new comedy is scheduled, part of the preparations for the upcoming festival, where playwrights will compete for honors and civic recognition. The theater itself is a marvel of design, its semicircular form allowing thousands of spectators to see and hear the performance clearly. The acoustics are so perfect that even at the highest tiers, the natural voice of an actor on stage can be heard without amplification, an architectural achievement that still impresses today. You find a seat on the stone benches, noticing how they're carved with shallow depressions to mark individual spaces and small channels to drain rainwater. Even in these practical details, the Greeks demonstrate their attention to both function and comfort within the constraints of their technology. The audience assembles, men, women, even some children, though the front rows are reserved for priests, officials, and honored citizens. Theater in Athens is inclusive, subsidized by the state and wealthy patrons to ensure that even poorer citizens can attend these performances that shape cultural values. The play begins with a procession honoring Dionysus, reminding everyone of theater's sacred origins and religious ritual. Then the chorus enters, wearing masks and costumes that transform ordinary citizens into performers. Their synchronized movements and chanted verses create a hypnotic effect. The comedy itself is bawdy, political, and surprisingly modern in its targets. Corrupt officials, pretentious intellectuals, social climbers, and warmongers all face merciless mockery. The audience responds with unrestrained laughter, proving that humor can transcend millennia of cultural change. You're struck by how the playwright uses comedy to address serious issues: the ongoing war with Sparta, tensions between traditional values and new ideas, the proper balance of freedom and responsibility in a democracy. Entertainment and civic education blend seamlessly, neither diminishing the other. The performers wear exaggerated masks that project their characters' emotions to the furthest seats. Female roles are played by men, a convention that seems limiting by modern standards, yet inspired performances of remarkable psychological insight, proving that art can transcend its social limitations. As the play concludes with the chorus addressing the audience directly about the lessons to be drawn from the comedy, you reflect on how theater serves as both mirror and lamp for Athenian society, reflecting its contradictions while illuminating paths toward better collective choices. The performance ends as the sun begins to set, and the audience disperses into the gathering dusk. Some head to symposia, drinking parties where men gather for structured conversation and entertainment, reclining on couches while slaves serve wine and food, according to established ritual. Others return to homes where evening meals are being prepared, simple reflections of the midday feast. Family groups gather in courtyards or interior rooms as oil lamps are lit against the deepening darkness, creating islands of warm light in the sea of night that engulfs the city. You choose to climb a small hill outside the city walls where others have gathered to enjoy the cooling evening air and the spectacular view of Athens transforming as daylight fades. The Acropolis catches the last golden rays of the setting sun, its marble seeming to glow with inner light. As darkness falls completely, pinpoints of light appear throughout the city. Oil lamps in windows, torches marking entrances to public buildings, sacred fires tended in temples. Without electric illumination, the night sky reveals itself in breathtaking clarity. Constellations that guided sailors and marked the agricultural calendar now shine above you in patterns both familiar and strange. Nearby, a group of young men softly sing a drinking song, their voices harmonizing in modes that sound slightly foreign to your ear. The Dorian, Phrygian, and Lydian scales that form the foundation of Greek music and will eventually evolve into Western musical traditions thousands of years later. The evening air carries a complex bouquet of scents: wood smoke from cooking fires, night-blooming flowers, the ever-present hint of olive oil, and the salt tang from the distant sea. The sensory experience of Athens is richer after sunset, when visual stimuli recede and other senses heighten. You engage in conversation with a fellow hillside visitor, an older merchant who has traveled throughout the Mediterranean world. His stories of Egyptian monuments, Persian luxury, and the strange customs of peoples beyond the Black Sea remind you that even in this ancient era, cultures connected and influenced each other. He speaks of Athens with pride but not blind devotion, criticizing recent political decisions while acknowledging the city's achievements. This balanced perspective, patriotic yet questioning, seems emblematic of the Athenian spirit at its best, committed to the community while constantly examining its values. As the evening grows later, the city quiets further. Without artificial light to extend activities, most Athenians retire early, especially those whose work begins with dawn. Only during festivals and special occasions does communal life continue deep into the night. You make your way back through streets now navigated primarily by touch and memory. The few people still abroad carry small oil lamps that create moving bubbles of light in the darkness, their faces illuminated from below, in a manner reminiscent of children telling ghost stories with flashlights. The next morning dawns clear again. Athens enjoys a climate of abundant sunshine, with nearly 300 clear days each year. This reliable weather shaped everything from architecture to social customs, creating a culture oriented toward outdoor life and public gathering. Today you've arranged to accompany a citizen to the assembly, the ecclesia, where the direct democracy that makes Athens famous actually functions. Only adult male citizens can participate, a minority of the total population, but still thousands of men from every economic class within the citizen body. The assembly meets on the Pnyx, a hill opposite the Acropolis with a spectacular view of the city. As you climb the path alongside hundreds of other attendees, you feel the physical embodiment of democratic participation, the literal uphill journey required to take part in governance. Officials at the entrance mark attendees with red ochre to identify those eligible for the payment that enables poorer citizens to attend without sacrificing a day's wages. This small fee, initially instituted by Pericles, acknowledges that political equality requires economic provisions to make participation possible. The meeting space consists of a semicircular retaining wall, creating a level area where thousands can gather, with a raised speaking platform, the bema, facing the audience. The design is purely functional. No columns or decorative elements distract from the serious business of self-governance. A herald opens the proceedings with prayers and sacrifices, connecting civic action to divine sanction. Then the agenda is announced. Today the assembly will discuss relations with allied cities, funding for naval operations, and a proposal to honor citizens who have shown extraordinary service to Athens. Any citizen can speak, though in practice experienced orators dominate the discussion. When a shipwright rises to address concerns about naval expenditures, bringing practical knowledge to the debate, you witness the theoretical ideal of democratic participation becoming reality, however imperfectly. The contrast between modern representative democracy and this direct participation is striking. No elected officials make decisions on behalf of others. Citizens themselves vote directly on matters from taxation to treaties to trials of public figures accused of misconduct. The debate grows heated over whether to increase tribute demanded from allied cities, essentially taxes paid by other Greek states for protection by the Athenian navy. Some speakers argue pragmatically for maximum revenue. Others warn that excessive demands might drive allies to rebellion. You notice how oratorical skill shapes outcomes as much as logical arguments. A mediocre proposal delivered with rhetorical flourish and emotional appeal gains more support than a sounder plan presented awkwardly. This human element in politics remains unchanged across millennia. When the discussion concludes, votes are taken by show of hands, a simple, transparent method that allows everyone to see the collective will emerging. The count is approximate rather than exact, but in most cases the visual consensus is clear enough to establish legitimate decisions. The assembly concludes before midday, allowing citizens to return to their various occupations. The entire process impresses you with both its achievements and limitations. Direct participation creating genuine investment in outcomes, yet still excluding most residents and sometimes favoring style over substance. As you leave the Pnyx, your companion invites you to visit his workshop where he crafts armor and weapons, a prosperous business in a city-state frequently at war. The invitation offers insight into the economic foundation that supports Athens' cultural and political flowering. The workshop occupies the ground floor of a modest building, open to the street so passers-by can observe the craftsmanship. Inside, several workers, both free men and slaves, hammer bronze into greaves, breastplates, and helmet crests, each performing specialized tasks in a coordinated process. The master craftsman explains his methods as he inspects a nearly completed helmet, pointing out how the metal is shaped to deflect blows while allowing the wearer sufficient vision and hearing. The design reflects generations of battlefield experience translated into practical protection. You notice how the division of labor creates efficiency without sacrificing quality. One worker focuses solely on hinges for armor joints. Another specializes in decorative elements that transform functional objects into expressions of Greek aesthetic values. Each person's contribution is both practical and artistic. This integration of beauty and utility characterizes Greek material culture. Even everyday objects show attention to proportion, decoration, and quality that elevates them from mere functionality. A water jug isn't just a container, but a canvas for storytelling through painted figures. A door hinge becomes an opportunity for elegant design. The economic system supporting this craftsmanship differs fundamentally from modern capitalism. The goal isn't constant growth or maximized profit, but sufficient prosperity to maintain social position and fulfill obligations to family, community, and gods. Wealth serves social and civic purposes rather than accumulation for its own sake. As midday approaches, the craftsmen set aside their tools for the main meal and rest period. Their calloused hands and muscular forearms bear witness to years of physical labor that modern machinery has largely eliminated from manufacturing. Their pride in creating objects that will outlast them by centuries is palpable. You leave the workshop with a deeper appreciation for the material foundation, supporting Athens' intellectual achievements. The philosophers whose ideas still shape Western thought were sustained by an economy of skilled craftsmanship, agricultural production, and trade that created sufficient surplus for cultural pursuits. The afternoon presents an opportunity to explore Athens' religious life more deeply by attending a sacrifice at the temple of Hephaestus, patron of craftspeople and metalworkers. Religious observance in Athens isn't confined to specialists, but woven into civic and personal identity through regular ritual participation. The temple stands near the craftsman's district, a beautiful Doric structure of marble that glows golden in the afternoon light. Unlike modern religious buildings designed primarily for congregational gathering, Greek temples house the deity's statue and treasury, with most activities occurring outside at the altar. A procession arrives leading a bull adorned with garlands and ribbons. The animal will be sacrificed to honor Hephaestus and ask his blessing on the city's craftspeople. The ritual follows ancient patterns: purification with water, prayers, barley grains scattered on the animal and altar, followed by the sacrifice itself. The actual killing happens quickly and is considered most favorable when the animal seems to approach willingly. While the sight is jarring to modern sensibilities, you recognize that this direct confrontation with the reality of meat consumption contains an honesty often absent from your sanitized experience of plastic-wrapped supermarket products. After the sacrifice, portions of meat are set aside for the god, burned on the altar so the smoke carries the offering upward, while the remainder is distributed for a communal feast. This sharing of meat creates a three-way relationship between humans, animals, and gods that gives meaning to the necessary taking of life for food. The communal meal that follows exemplifies how religion in Athens serves social purposes beyond theological expression, bringing together diverse citizens, reinforcing community bonds, and redistributing resources through shared consumption. The ritual provides both spiritual and practical benefits to participants. As evening approaches again, you decide to explore a different aspect of Athenian social life by visiting a household preparing for a wedding celebration. Marriage forms a cornerstone of social organization, though its purpose, creating legitimate children and forming family alliances, differs from modern romantic ideals. The bride, a girl of about 15, is being prepared by female relatives who bathe her in water carried from a sacred spring, dress her in a special tunic, and adorn her with jewelry that symbolizes her transition from maiden to wife. Her youth is typical. Athenian girls usually marry soon after puberty to men often twice their age or older. The mood combines joy and solemnity as the women sing traditional songs both celebrating and mourning this threshold crossing. For the bride, marriage means leaving her childhood home for her husband's household, a profound separation from familiar surroundings and relationships. Meanwhile, at the groom's house, male relatives and friends gather for their own preparatory celebration. The contrast between the gender-segregated activities highlights how marriage unites not just individuals but entire family networks, each with distinct roles and responsibilities in maintaining social order. The wedding ceremony itself begins at dusk with a procession that will lead the bride to her new home. Torchbearers light the way, musicians play flutes and lyres, and participants sing hymeneals, wedding songs invoking divine blessings on the union. The public nature of the procession announces the legitimacy of the marriage to the community. At the groom's house, the bride is welcomed with symbolic gestures, nuts and dried fruits showered upon the couple to promote fertility, a ritual washing of the bride's feet, and her introduction to the household hearth that she will now tend. Each element reinforces her new responsibilities and connections. The festivities continue into the night, one of the few occasions when social activities extend after dark by design. The wedding feast includes special cakes, wine flows freely, and dancing continues until guests escort the couple to their bridal chamber with more songs and good-natured teasing. You notice how the entire process emphasizes the social rather than personal nature of marriage, its function in creating legitimate heirs, forming alliances between families, and maintaining property arrangements. Romantic love might develop between spouses, but it's considered a fortunate bonus rather than the foundation of the relationship. The next morning finds you exploring the port of Piraeus, Athens' maritime lifeline located about 5 miles from the city center. Connected to Athens by the long walls, fortified roadways that protect the route during wartime, Piraeus epitomizes the seafaring nature of Athenian power and prosperity. The harbor bustles with activity from dawn, ships being loaded and unloaded, fishermen selling their morning catch, merchants negotiating deals for cargoes from across the Mediterranean, and naval officials inspecting the triremes that form Athens's primary military strength. The diversity of people here exceeds even the cosmopolitan center of Athens. Sailors from Egypt, Phoenicia, and the Black Sea regions mingle with local workers, creating a multilingual environment where trade transcends cultural boundaries. You hear languages and accents that would be rare in the more homogeneous civic center. Goods from throughout the known world pass through this port: grain from the Black Sea regions, papyrus from Egypt, amber from the Baltic, spices from the East, silver from mines in Attica, and pottery from Athens' own workshops bound for markets abroad. This international commerce underpins the city's wealth and influence. The naval yards reveal the source of Athenian military power: triremes, sleek warships powered by 170 rowers arranged in 3 tiers. These vessels represent cutting-edge military technology, capable of ramming enemy ships or deploying Marines for boarding actions. Their maintenance and crewing consume significant portions of the city's resources. Unlike modern naval vessels designed to operate independently for months, these warships require daily shore support. The crews sleep on land rather than aboard, and the ships themselves are often pulled onto shore to prevent waterlogging. Their effectiveness depends on skilled coordination of hundreds of individuals working in precise synchrony. Shipwrights repair and construct vessels using techniques refined over generations. You watch as they steam wooden planks to create the curved hull sections, using no written plans but working from inherited knowledge and experience. The resulting ships are both functional weapons and expressions of craftsmanship. Beyond the military harbor lies the commercial port, where merchant vessels load and unload cargoes. The ships are broader, deeper, and primarily sail-powered, designed for carrying capacity rather than speed or maneuverability. Their arrival and departure depend on seasonal winds, creating distinct trading patterns throughout the year. Customs officials assess imported goods, collecting the taxes that help fund Athens' public works and military operations. The bureaucracy supporting this system operates with surprising efficiency given the technological limitations. Clay tablets record transactions while sealed containers help prevent fraud during transport. Nearby stands the Emporium, a marketplace specifically for foreign trade, where wholesale transactions occur between merchants from different regions. The commercial relationships formed here extend beyond simple exchange to include credit arrangements, partnerships, and information networks that connect distant communities. The economic activity surrounding you represents capitalism in its embryonic form: private ownership, profit motivation, and market exchange operating within a framework of social relationships and civic obligations, very different from modern economic systems. Wealth brings responsibility as well as privilege in the Athenian worldview. As midday approaches, you join a group of sailors at a dockside tavern serving simple but hearty food: fish stew, bread, olives, and wine. The conversations around you focus on practical matters: weather predictions, news of pirate activity, comparative prices in different ports, the eternal concerns of those who make their living from the sea. The afternoon finds you returning to Athens proper along the main road connecting city and port. The journey offers time to reflect on how this physical link, protected by the massive long walls, represents Athens' dual identity as both land-based polis and maritime empire, a tension that shapes its politics and culture. As you approach the city gates, you encounter a group of medics, resident aliens who live and work in Athens without citizenship rights. These immigrants form a vital part of the economic fabric, filling roles in manufacturing, commerce, and services, yet remain politically marginalized despite their contributions. One such medic, a skilled metalworker from Syracuse, walks alongside you and shares his perspective on Athenian society. Appreciative of the economic opportunities and relative stability, yet conscious of the limitations imposed by his status. His children, though born in Athens, will inherit this intermediate position between citizen and foreigner. His experience highlights another paradox of Athenian democracy: its revolutionary inclusiveness within the citizen body, coexisting with strict exclusion of outsiders, women, and slaves from political participation. The radical equality among citizens depends partly on these boundaries that define who belongs and who doesn't. Entering the city again, you pass through a residential neighborhood where children play in narrow streets under the watchful eyes of women sitting in doorways, working on spinning or weaving while supervising the young. This scene of domestic life continues uninterrupted while male citizens debate war and peace at the assembly. You notice how the architectural separation between private and public spaces reflects gender roles. The interior of homes belongs primarily to women's authority, while exterior spaces constitute the male domain. Yet this division isn't absolute. Women participate in religious festivals, market activities, and neighborhood networks that extend beyond household walls. The afternoon sun beats down with intensity that explains the whitewashed walls reflecting its glare. Climate shapes daily rhythms, architectural choices, and social patterns in ways so fundamental they become invisible to inhabitants, just as your own climate-controlled existence shapes behaviors you rarely question. As the day begins its gradual transition toward evening, You witness an impromptu musical performance in a small square where several streets converge. A man plays the aulos, a double-piped wind instrument, while another accompanies him on a frame drum, drawing a small crowd of appreciative listeners. Music permeates Athenian life beyond formal performances, accompanying religious rituals, enlivening work rhythms, marking life transitions, and providing entertainment. The mathematical principles underlying musical harmony connect to broader Greek interest in finding numerical relationships that explain natural phenomena. The sunset brings another distinctive sensory experience as cooking fires are lit throughout the city, and the aroma of evening meals fills the air. Roasting meats for wealthier households, bubbling lentil pottage for more modest tables, fresh bread from communal ovens all seasoned with herbs grown in household gardens. You find yourself invited to join a symposium at the home of a moderately wealthy citizen, an evening gathering of men for structured drinking, conversation, and entertainment that serves as both social bonding and intellectual exchange. While not the philosophical ideal depicted by Plato, this gathering reveals how intellectual culture permeates various social levels. The andron, men's dining room, is specially designed for symposium gatherings with couches arranged along the walls where participants recline, small tables for food and drink, and decoration that often includes scenes from mythology or daily life that might spark conversation. The evening begins with ritual hand-washing and offerings to the gods, followed by the selection of a symposiarch who will determine the water-to-wine ratio and topics for discussion. This formal structure channels the drinking experience toward sociability and idea exchange rather than mere intoxication. Slaves bring in the crater, a large vessel where wine and water are mixed according to the symposiarch's direction, typically 3 parts water to 1 part wine, creating a diluted beverage that allows conversation to flow while preventing rapid intoxication. Drinking unmixed wine is considered barbaric, suitable only for uncivilized peoples. The food is simple, designed to complement rather than compete with the wine. Small portions of cheese, olives, bread, and preserved fish provide sustenance without requiring the attention that a formal meal would demand. The focus remains on social interaction rather than culinary experience. As cups are filled and passed, the symposiarch announces the evening's topic. Whether virtue can be taught or comes naturally to some people, the question reflects typical Greek interest in education, excellence, and human potential, concerns that cross social boundaries from philosophical schools to neighborhood discussions. The conversation reveals varying levels of education among participants. Some quote Homer and Hesiod from memory, others refer to sophists whose lectures they've attended, while others draw on practical experience and observation. Despite these differences, all engage as equals in the exchange, embodying democratic principles in social practice. Entertainment arrives in the form of a hired flute girl who performs music as background to the conversation, occasionally supplemented by participants who take turns singing drinking songs or reciting poetry. The presence of this female entertainer, often a slave, contrasts with the absence of citizen women from symposium gatherings. As the evening progresses and wine consumption increases, the conversation becomes more animated, touching on politics, personal rivalries, athletic competitions, and theatrical performances. The symposium functions as an information exchange network as well as entertainment, spreading news and opinions through social circles. Games often feature in symposia, riddles, wordplay, or kotabos, where participants flick wine dregs at targets while naming beloved persons. These playful elements balance the intellectual conversation, creating a multi-dimensional social experience that builds bonds between participants. The symposium concludes late in the evening as participants either return home, sometimes in boisterous processions through the streets, or sleep where they recline, depending on the amount of wine consumed and distance to their dwellings. The evening represents recreation with purpose, relaxation that strengthens social and intellectual connections essential to civic life. The next morning dawns with a different character. It's a festival day honoring Athena, the city's patron goddess. Religious observances punctuate the Athenian calendar, creating rhythmic breaks from daily routines when the entire community participates in shared ritual and celebration. The city transforms visually. Doorways decorated with olive branches, public spaces adorned with flowers and ribbons, statues of the goddess freshly garlanded. Even the most humble dwellings display some token of participation, creating visual unity across social divisions. Streets fill early with citizens in their finest clothing, many wearing special garments reserved for religious occasions. The colorful procession forms at the city gates, organized by tribe and age group, everyone finding their designated place in the ceremonial order that reflects the social structure. Musicians lead with aulos, lyres, and percussion instruments, creating a distinctive processional rhythm. Behind them come baskets of offerings carried by selected young women of citizen families, a prestigious role that showcases family status and the daughter's eligibility for marriage. The procession includes animals destined for sacrifice, cattle with gilded horns, sheep with dyed wool, all decorated with ribbons and apparently willing participants in the ceremony. Maintaining this appearance of voluntary sacrifice holds religious significance. A struggling animal would be considered an ill omen. As the procession winds through the city toward the Acropolis, participants and spectators alike experience a sense of community that transcends daily divisions. For this sacred time, the polis exists as a unified entity rather than a collection of competing interests and social categories. The route passes significant landmarks where the procession pauses for specific rituals, pouring libations, reciting prayers, performing short dances that connect present observances to mythic events in the city's sacred history. These pauses create rhythm within the larger ceremonial movement. Finally ascending the Acropolis, the procession reaches its culmination at the Great Altar before the Parthenon. Here, priests perform the central sacrifices that renew the covenant between Athena and her city. The smoke from burning offerings rises toward the heavens, carrying the community's gratitude and petitions. The religious ceremony combines solemn reverence with celebratory elements, prayers and rituals performed with precision, followed by communal feasting on the sacrificial meat, athletic competitions, music, and dancing that continue throughout the day and into the evening. You notice how the festival creates opportunities for social mixing not present in daily life. Citizen men and women sharing public space, children and elders participating according to their abilities, even slaves enjoying limited holiday freedoms. The religious context temporarily softens boundaries that structure ordinary experience. The evening brings dramatic performances specially prepared for the festival, tragedies exploring human relationship with divine forces, comedies satirizing current political figures, choral odes celebrating the city's mythic foundations. These aren't merely entertainment but religious offerings that examine the community's values and challenges. As night falls, torchlit processions create rivers of light flowing through the darkened city, accompanied by singing and rhythmic movements that induce a sense of collective harmony. The shared experience generates what later sociologists will call collective effervescence, a heightened sense of connection that reinforces social bonds. The following day, returning to normal activities feels like awakening from a shared dream. Yet the experience has served important functions, releasing social tensions, reinforcing cultural values, and creating memories that sustain community identity through more ordinary times. As your time in ancient Athens draws to a close, you spend a final day simply wandering the city, absorbing details and impressions that might otherwise escape notice. The texture of stone walls worn smooth by generations of passing hands, the precise joinery of marble blocks fitted without mortar, the spontaneous poetry competition between two friends in a quiet courtyard. You pause at a modest shrine where a grandmother teaches her granddaughter the proper way to place an offering, explaining the story behind the ritual in the same words she heard from her own grandmother decades earlier. This living transmission of cultural knowledge connects generations through shared practice. In the market, you observe the complex social dance of haggling, not merely negotiating price but establishing relationship between buyer and seller through ritualized interaction. The exchange of goods becomes an exchange of recognition, humor, and respect that transforms economic transaction into social connection. You watch children playing knucklebones in an alley, inventing complex rules and adjudicating disputes with passionate arguments worthy of the law courts. Their play mimics the adult world of competition and negotiation, preparing them for citizenship through seemingly trivial games. A craftsman carves a small wooden toy for his daughter, his weathered hands creating with the same care he would devote to a commissioned piece for a wealthy patron. The aesthetic sensitivity that produces magnificent public buildings extends to these private moments of creation for beloved individuals. An elderly man sits in the shade, recounting tales of the Persian Wars to attentive youngsters, oral history transmitted directly from participant to future citizens. His account combines factual details with moral lessons about courage and sacrifice, education seamlessly blended with entertainment. Two philosophers argue in a small garden, surrounded by students who listen intently to the exchange of ideas. The conversation moves from specific question to universal principle and back again, modeling the intellectual agility that Athens both produces and prizes. A young couple steals a private moment near a public fountain, their brief touch and exchanged glances containing depths of feeling constrained by social conventions. Even in this society of limited privacy and arranged marriages, personal connection finds expression within established boundaries. As twilight approaches on your final day, you climb once more to a vantage point overlooking the city. The Acropolis catches the setting sun's golden light, while below, the intricate maze of streets and buildings buzzes with the closing activities of another day in this remarkable community. From this perspective, you can appreciate both the physical and conceptual architecture of Athens, a city that built not just structures of stone, but frameworks of thought that would support intellectual endeavors for millennia to come. You reflect on what makes this place both alien and familiar. The physical conditions of life differ dramatically from your modern experience. The absence of electronic communication, mechanical transportation, and industrial production, creating a world that operates at human scale and pace. Yet the fundamental experiences that define humanity remain recognizable across the millennia. The desire for connection, the search for meaning, the joy of creation, the satisfaction of shared accomplishment, the comfort of familiar ritual, and the excitement of new discovery. Athens' greatest achievement might be this: creating a community that, despite its profound limitations and contradictions, valued human potential enough to create space for its development. The democratic experiment, however flawed in its original form, planted seeds that would eventually grow into broader concepts of human rights and governance. The philosophical traditions born in dusty market conversations would eventually challenge divine right monarchies, inspire scientific revolution, and provide conceptual foundations for modern thought. The aesthetic principles embodied in temples and pottery would influence art for centuries to come. Most importantly, the Athenian willingness to question, to seek improvement rather than merely maintain tradition, created a dynamic culture capable of self-reflection and growth. In a world dominated by unchanging autocracies, Athens demonstrated the creative potential of structured freedom, a legacy more valuable than its marble monuments. As darkness falls on your last evening in ancient Athens, you carry away not just memories of sights, sounds, and tastes, but a deeper understanding of both human continuity and transformation across time. The people who walked these streets faced different circumstances but shared your fundamental hopes, fears, and capacity for wonder. Their world, simultaneously brutal and beautiful, limiting and liberating, reminds you that all societies contain contradictions, that progress happens unevenly, and that the seeds of future transformation often lie within the very structures that seem most permanent. The ancient Athenians couldn't imagine your world, with its technological marvels and expanded concepts of rights and dignity. Yet their questions about justice, beauty, knowledge, and purpose remain relevant because they touched something essential about human experience that transcends particular times and places. Perhaps this is the most valuable insight from your journey through ancient Athens, seeing how ideas born in specific historical circumstances can contain universal elements that speak across centuries, reminding us that while conditions change, the fundamental human search for meaning, connection, and understanding continues unbroken. In this city of marble and mud, philosophy and superstition, exclusion and innovation, you've glimpsed both the limitations of the past and the enduring power of human creativity to imagine beyond present boundaries. Athens remains worth studying, not because it was perfect, but because it dared to question, to create, and to dream of better possibilities. As you prepare to leave this ancient world behind, you carry with you not just knowledge of historical details, but a living connection to people who, despite the vast differences in their daily experience, shared your essential humanity, your capacity for wonder, for relationship, and for imagining worlds beyond what currently exists. This perhaps is the true gift of engaging with the past, not nostalgia for imagined golden ages, but recognition of our place in the long, continuing conversation of human culture. Athens, for all its contradictions, helped begin that conversation in ways that still enrich it today, inviting each new generation to contribute their own questions and insights. And in that ongoing dialogue between past and present, between what was and what might be, we find both our roots and our possibilities, the foundation that supports us, and the open horizon that calls us forward. If this journey through olive groves, flawed democracies, and naked gymnasiums made you see ancient Greece in a new light, leave a like to honor the chaos behind the columns. Subscribe if you're into history that doesn't come pre-polished. And tell me in the comments, if you were dropped into Athens in 450 BCE, would you be a philosopher, a playwright, or just really confused? Either way, thanks for watching. And remember, asking why is the most Greek thing you can do.